Sofia pressed her nose against the ancient honey jar's golden glass. The liquid inside swirled like molten sunshine, hypnotic and warm. One tiny crack appeared near the lid, then another. Before anyone could shout a warning, the entire jar exploded outward in a tsunami of golden sweetness that coated everything it touched. The castle halls transformed instantly. Stone floors became rivers of flowing honey. Tapestries dripped amber nectar. Even the air itself turned thick and sugary, making every breath taste like dessert. Sofia's boots stuck to the ground with each step, making wet, squelching sounds that would have been funny under different circumstances. "My dress!" Amber shrieked, watching golden honey crawl up the silk like it was alive. Her perfectly styled hair began drooping under the weight of sticky sweetness, coating each strand. But that wasn't the worst part. The honey wasn't just spreading. It was growing, expanding, building itself into towers and walls and structures that defied physics. Within minutes, an entire honeycomb maze had erupted throughout the castle's interior, trapping everyone inside geometric prison cells made of crystallized sugar. James swung his sword at the nearest wall. The blade bounced off harmlessly, sending vibrations up his arm. "It's solid, harder than stone." Cedric tried a spell, his wand crackling with purple energy. The magic hit the honey barrier and simply absorbed into it, making the wall glow brighter for a moment before returning to its original state. Impossible. It's consuming magical energy and using it to strengthen itself. Sofia watched the honey pulse with an almost living rhythm. There was intelligence here, purpose. This wasn't just enchanted food gone wrong. Something ancient had awakened, and it was remaking their world into its own image. Clover hopped frantically on a small stone island, not yet consumed by the golden flood. "I'm a rabbit, not a bee. I don't do hives." The temperature began rising, not from external heat, but from the honey itself, generating warmth as it continued its relentless expansion. Sofia felt sweat forming on her forehead. The sweet smell that had been pleasant moments ago now felt suffocating, pressing into her lungs with every breath. "We need to move higher," she called out, spotting a staircase not yet fully covered. "Before we're completely sealed in." They ran, or tried to. Each step required pulling their feet free from the sticky surface, with effort that made their legs burn. The honey seemed to fight back, gripping harder the more they struggled. Amber lost a shoe. James nearly fell twice. Cedric's robes collected so much golden residue, he looked like he'd been dipped in liquid sunshine. Halfway up the stairs, Sofia glanced back and immediately wished she hadn't. The honey was forming shapes now, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Hexagons within hexagons, spiraling into mathematical infinity, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "Don't stare at it," Cedric warned, his voice strained. "That pattern will trap your mind just as surely as the honey traps your body." They reached the second-floor landing, gasping for air in the increasingly thick atmosphere. But their relief lasted exactly 3 seconds before they heard it, a sound that made everyone freeze. Buzzing, deep, resonant buzzing that vibrated through the honey walls and into their bones. Not the gentle hum of garden bees, but something massive, something that shouldn't exist. "Please tell me that's not what I think it is," Amber whispered. The wall to their left began to bulge. Something pushed against it from the other side. Something big enough to deform solid crystallized honey. The buzzing grew louder, joined by clicking sounds and the scrape of legs against hard surfaces. Sofia's amulet suddenly flared with light, hot against her chest. It had never done that before. The glow intensified, and for just a moment, she saw through the honey walls like they were transparent glass. What she saw on the other side made her blood freeze. Giant bees. Not regular-sized insects magnified by magic, but creatures the size of horses, with wings that spanned wider than Sofia was tall. Their compound eyes reflected the honey's golden light in 1,000 facets. Stingers as long as swords dripped with venom that sizzled when it hit the floor, and they were looking directly at her. "Run!" Sofia didn't explain, just grabbed Clover and bolted toward the tower stairs. The others followed without question, trusting her panic. Behind them, the wall exploded inward. Chunks of crystallized honey flew through the air like amber shrapnel. The first giant bee emerged, its massive body scraping against the opening it had created. The buzzing became deafening. They climbed. 3rd floor, 4th floor. The tower stairs spiraled upward in a dizzying ascent. Sofia's legs screamed in protest, but the sound of enormous wings and clicking mandibles right behind them kept her moving. James risked a glance back and went pale. "There's more than one!" 3 giant bees pursued them up the narrow staircase, their bodies too large for the space, but that didn't slow them down. They simply crashed through walls, creating their own path, leaving destruction in their wake. The stairs ended at a heavy wooden door. Sofia slammed into it with her shoulder. Locked. Of course it was locked. The lead bee was 10 feet away, 8 feet, close enough that Sofia could see the tiny hairs covering its body, each one coated in sticky pollen. Cedric raised his wand with shaking hands. "Everyone behind me. This might not work, but..." The door burst open from the inside. Minimus stood there, his wings already spread. "Quick, inside!" They tumbled through the doorway just as the first bee lunged. Minimus slammed the door shut, and they heard the massive insect crash into solid oak with enough force to shake the entire tower. But they weren't safe yet, not even close, because standing in the center of the room, pulsing with golden light and surrounded by swirling patterns of living honey, was something that made the giant bees look like minor threats. The heart of the hive, the source, and it was already looking at them with an intelligence that was definitely not natural. Sofia realized with growing dread that escaping the honey would be the easy part. Understanding what it wanted, that was going to be much harder. The thing wasn't a bee, not exactly. It looked like someone had taken the concept of queen bee and filtered it through a nightmare made of geometry and light. The body was there, massive and segmented, but instead of chitin, it seemed constructed from flowing honey that never quite solidified. Patterns moved across its surface, mathematical and precise, like equations written in liquid gold, and it was looking at them, really looking, with an awareness that made Sofia's skin crawl. "That's not an insect," Cedric breathed. His wand hand had stopped shaking, but only because he seemed too stunned to move at all. "That's a construct, a magical construct using the honey as a medium." The thing tilted what might have been a head. The movement was too smooth, too deliberate. Natural creatures didn't move like that. Clover pressed against Sofia's leg. "I really don't like this. Can we go back to the giant bees? Those seemed friendlier." James had his sword out, though what good steel would do against living honey, Sofia couldn't imagine. "What does it want?" As if answering his question, the construct shifted. The honey composing its body rippled and reformed, creating new shapes. Images appeared on its surface, like reflections in disturbed water. Sofia saw herself, but not as she was now. She saw herself younger, in the garden, the first time she'd worn the amulet. She saw the moment she'd helped that baby bird, the moment the amulet had chosen her. "It's showing me memories," she whispered. "My memories." The image shifted. Now it showed Cedric, but not the nervous wizard standing beside her. This Cedric stood tall and confident, performing magic with casual mastery, admired by everyone. The Cedric he'd always wanted to be. Amber's eyes widened as her own image appeared. She saw herself not as a princess, but as something more. A leader, wise and kind. The kind of ruler people would follow anywhere. "It's reading us," Amber said quietly, "showing us what we want most." The construct pulsed with brighter light, and suddenly Sofia understood. Not through words, because this thing didn't speak. It communicated through feeling, through images that bypassed language entirely. It was lonely. The realization hit her like a physical force. This magical construct, this impossible being made of honey and mathematics, had been created for a purpose it could no longer remember. Left alone for so long that it had started reaching out to anything that entered its domain, trying to understand, trying to connect. The honey everywhere, the transformations, even the giant bees, they weren't attacks. They were attempts at communication from something that had forgotten how to be understood. "Sofia," Minimus warned, "the door won't hold much longer." The giant bees outside had regrouped and were taking turns ramming the oak barrier. Cracks spider-webbed across the wood with each impact. Whatever they decided to do, they needed to decide fast. Sofia stepped forward. Cedric grabbed her arm. "Princess, wait. We don't know what it will do." "I know." She gently pulled free. "But I think I know what it needs." She walked toward the construct, each step feeling like it took an hour. The closer she got, the more she could feel it. This vast loneliness radiating outward, like heat from a fire. How long had it been here? Decades? Centuries? The amulet against her chest grew warm again. Not burning, but comforting. Familiar. Sofia stopped 3 feet away from the construct and did something that probably ranked high on the list of terrible ideas. She reached out her hand. The construct's surface rippled where her fingers touched it. The honey was warm and moved like silk, reforming around her hand without sticking. Through that contact, she felt everything. Ages of solitude, a creator long gone, a purpose eroded by time until only the longing remained. It had been trying to recreate connection the only way it knew how, by transforming everything into itself, into honey, because maybe then it wouldn't be alone anymore. Tears ran down Sofia's face. She didn't know if they were hers, or somehow the construct's, translated through their connection into something she could understand. "You don't have to be alone," she whispered. The construct shuddered. The honey composing its form began to break apart, but not violently, gently, like snow melting in spring's sun. The patterns on its surface resolved into something clearer, something almost like gratitude. Behind them, the door finally gave way. The giant bees burst through, but they weren't attacking. They hovered uncertainly, their aggression fading as the construct dissolved, because the bees were part of it, extensions of its consciousness, attempts to create company in a world where it had none. The honey throughout the castle began to retreat. Sofia could feel it through her connection with the construct, could sense the transformation reversing everywhere at once. In the throne room, her parents would be waking up. In the kitchen, dishes would be returning to porcelain. The world was being restored, but something was being lost too. She could feel the construct fading, its energy dispersing as it released its hold on the castle. Soon, there would be nothing left. "Wait," Sofia said. "There has to be another way." The construct pulsed once more. An image formed in her mind, clear as day. Not a memory this time, but a gift. Understanding flooded through her, knowledge about magic and connection, in the spaces between loneliness and belonging. Then it was gone. The last of the honey faded to nothing, leaving only regular air and stone and wood. The giant bees dissolved into ordinary insects that flew out through the broken door. Just normal bees looking for flowers. The room fell silent. Cedric lowered his wand. James sheathed his sword. Amber let out a breath she'd been holding for what felt like forever. Sofia stood in the center of the empty space, her hand still outstretched toward where the construct had been, feeling the absence like an ache. "Well," Clover said finally, "that was intense, but at least the honey's gone, right?" Sofia nodded slowly. The honey was gone. The castle was saved. Everything was back to normal. So why did she feel like they'd just lost something irreplaceable? They found her mother in the throne room, standing beside her father, both looking disoriented but unharmed. The honey had vanished completely, leaving not even a trace of stickiness on the marble floors. "Sofia?" Her mother's voice held confusion and concern in equal measure. "What happened? I remember sweetness, and then nothing." "It's over now," Sofia said quietly. She wanted to explain everything. The loneliness, the longing, the construct that just wanted connection. But how could she make them understand something she barely grasped herself? Her father cleared his throat. "Whatever occurred, I trust you handled it with your usual resourcefulness." He glanced at Cedric, who looked remarkably disheveled. Though perhaps Mr. Cedric could provide a more detailed accounting, Cedric straightened his robes with as much dignity as he could muster. "A magical anomaly, Your Majesty. Potentially ancient in origin. The princess showed remarkable restraint in resolving it without destructive force." That was the closest Cedric ever came to genuine praise. Sofia caught his eye and saw something there she hadn't expected. Understanding, maybe. Or at least acknowledgement that some things couldn't be fixed with fire spells and explosions. The castle staff appeared gradually, emerging from various rooms in states of confusion. Bailey Wick claimed he'd been having the most wonderful dream about pastries. The head gardener swore she'd been floating. Nobody could quite piece together what had actually transpired. That evening, Sofia sat in her room with Clover sprawled across her bed, grooming honey residue from his fur. "You okay?" he asked, between licks. "You've been weird since everything went back to normal." "Define normal." Sofia traced patterns on her desk with one finger. "We just encountered something that existed for who knows how long, completely alone, trying desperately to connect with anything. And now it's just gone." Clover paused his grooming. "You're thinking about what it felt like, aren't you? When you touched it." She nodded. The memory remained vivid. That overwhelming sense of isolation stretching across time. It wasn't evil, Clover. It was just lonely. Is that really something that deserved to be erased? "You didn't erase it," Clover said gently. "You freed it. There's a difference." Maybe he was right. The construct had seemed almost relieved at the end, grateful to finally let go. But Sofia couldn't shake the feeling that they'd lost something important. Knowledge, perhaps, or perspective. Her hand drifted to the amulet at her neck, still warm, still humming with that subtle energy she'd learned to recognize. The construct had given her something before it faded, understanding that settled into her bones like muscle memory. She knew things now that she hadn't known before. About magic, yes, but also about connection and isolation and the fine line between helping and controlling. A knock interrupted her thoughts. James poked his head through the door. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. "I wanted to check on you." That whole thing was pretty intense. Sofia gestured for him to enter. He sat on the floor beside her desk, a position that would have scandalized the etiquette tutors, but felt comfortable between siblings. "Did you mean what you said?" James asked after a moment. "About it not having to be alone?" "I don't know if I could have actually helped it," Sofia admitted. "But I had to try. Destroying something just because we don't understand it feels wrong." James nodded slowly. Father wouldn't see it that way. To him, it was a threat that needed elimination. Clean, simple, done. "But that's not what happened," Sofia said. "It chose to let go. That's different from being defeated." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. The castle had returned to its normal rhythms. Servants preparing dinner, guards changing shifts, life continuing as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. But something had occurred. Sofia felt it in the new weight of understanding she carried, in the knowledge that had been gifted to her in those final moments. The construct might be gone, but its lesson remained. Loneliness could drive creatures to desperate measures. Connection mattered more than power. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't fighting, but reaching out. Amber appeared in the doorway, her dress immaculate once again. "Mother says dinner's ready. Also, I'm never eating honey again. Just so everyone knows." Sofia smiled despite herself. Leave it to Amber to reduce cosmic loneliness to a dietary preference. They headed downstairs together, the three of them plus Clover, who insisted he'd earned a seat at the table after surviving bee attacks and honey transformations. The dining hall glowed with candlelight, warm and welcoming. Her parents sat at their usual places, and for a moment, Sofia saw the scene as the construct might have. Connection, family, belonging, all the things it had craved and never possessed. She took her seat and felt the amulet pulse once more against her chest. A reminder, a promise. The next time she encountered something strange and inexplicable, she'd remember this. Remember that understanding could be more powerful than destruction. That sometimes the scariest things were just desperately lonely things, looking for connection in all the wrong ways. Cedric entered last, looking tired but satisfied. He'd probably spent the afternoon cataloging every magical anomaly in the castle, documenting the incident in his precise handwriting. That was his way of processing, his method of making sense of chaos. Everyone had their own way of dealing with the extraordinary. James with his sword, Amber with her deflection, Cedric with his documentation. Sofia's way was this: remembering, holding on to the lessons even when they hurt, carrying forward the understanding that came from touching something ancient and alone, and choosing compassion over fear. The construct was gone, but what it taught her would remain. The dinner conversation flowed around her, normal and mundane and perfect. Her mother asked about studies. Her father mentioned tomorrow's council meeting. Amber complained about a stain that wouldn't come out of her favorite shoes. James challenged Cedric to a chess match after dessert. Sofia listened and smiled and participated, but part of her mind remained in that tower room, feeling the weight of centuries-old loneliness dissolving into gratitude. She wondered if anyone else would remember this the way she did. Probably not. They'd been there, experienced it, survived it, but they hadn't touched it, hadn't felt what she felt. And maybe that was okay. Some understandings weren't meant to be shared, just carried forward, used to inform future choices when the next impossible thing appeared in their lives. Because there would be a next time. The amulet had shown her that much. Magic didn't follow rules. It created situations that defied logic and demanded responses that textbooks never covered. The real question wasn't whether strange things would happen again, but how she'd choose to respond when they did, with fear, with force, or with the kind of compassion that recognized loneliness even in its most alien forms. The amulet warmed against her skin one final time, then settled into its usual quiet hum. Sofia took a bite of dinner and decided that next time someone found a mysterious ancient jar, maybe they should leave it sealed. Some sleeping things earned their rest. But if another construct woke, if another lonely magical remnant reached out desperately for connection, she'd know what to do. She'd reach back, because in the end, that's what the honey had really been about. Not conquest or destruction, but connection. A reminder that even the strangest, most incomprehensible things might just need what everyone needs: to be understood, to be seen, to matter to someone. Sofia glanced around the table at her family, her friends, this constellation of people who made loneliness impossible. The construct had been right about one thing: connection was everything, worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth recognizing even in its most unexpected forms.